Hello and welcome to Skill-Based Art, a learning resource for arts students and arts teachers. My name is Ted Dansey and I'm here today to demonstrate to you a watercolour sketch produced plein air in St George's Road, Fitzroy and reproduced here in the studio. My materials are fairly simple, watercolours naturally, mostly transparent, 3 blues, yellows, reds. My brushes are round mops from squirrel or sable, whichever ones I pick up, and my trusted Faber-Castell Pitt pen, which I prefer to use for drawing rather than pencil, which can get a little bit smudgy, and it makes me keep it loose. My paper is 300 gram Arch Rough, which is my preferred paper, and I find it's more forgiving than so many others. So without further ado, we shall move on to our painting. Right, so we've chosen a subject today. It's the church in St George's Road, Fitzroy. It's early morning, nice backlighting, and I suppose the important thing with a subject like this is that we're looking at a little bit of composition. So light, shade, composition. You notice our spire here, it's around about a third of the page across, and around about halfway down is where we start. So we'll get it in position first. Quite important, always important. We'll start our drawing, we'll get our spire in. I love this spire. I draw with a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, and I rather enjoy them because they just sort of they stop me fussing, I guess. If I had a pencil, I'd be more inclined to want to do things exact, and I'll be rubbing out, doing all sorts of things, and it wouldn't be any good at all. But when you rub out, you tend to get a little bit smudgy. So once we get the church in, we're right. Then we've got a bit of perspective from the street, all these buildings down here, which tend to run the perspective. When I'm outdoors painting, I'm always looking for my perspective points, which comes down around about here somewhere. And everything will run off that line. So we just keep it nice and loose. Doesn't matter if everything isn't squared up. It's not the issue really. They come along here, about there, around about there. Okay. Bottom of the building, around about here. That's good. And then from that line we come out again. Everything tends to gravitate back to a certain point. That's your eye line. Okay. Here. Lovely old buildings, Fitzroy. Lovely old part of Melbourne. Now, if I'm painting indoors and I find things don't always fit where they are in my original, I don't fuss about it too much. It's just the way it is. And as long as I get a painting that I'm happy with, right, which is more important than anything. Perspective's right, everything's right, we're good. Nice little things on here, get back here. It's a pretty simple perspective really for a painting like this. Put a nice little chimney. If I keep my drawing loose, it means I need to draw better with my painting, and that's I'll put something there. My cars, when I look at this now, I feel like they probably sit a little bit low, and I'm just going to raise them up a little bit. I think we have a duty as painters to improve things where we can. And if that means taking things out, putting things in, that's what we do. A little bit, another one in there. Get too fussy, fairly impressionistic. I've got the bus stop in here, which I know you were sitting there wondering what it was. It's a bus stop. Okay. Nearly there. There. Just do a double take here. The building comes in here. Nice little one in the side. I'm sorry if I'm mumbling. When I'm doing this, I usually talking to myself. So if you can't understand me, it's because I'm not really talking to you. There. There. Nice little cottages. A lot of little cottages around Fitzroy. Okay. Things pretty much. There's where my fences go. A few little trees. They're always good, they hide things for you. Things like, I might not put any more into the drawing because I can put them in later. There's a lamppost here. I'll put that round about there. So as you can see, I've got things positioned pretty much where I want them. And now it's a matter of painting, so I'll start off with my lightest lights, naturally, which is, unless you're an oil painter, watercolours, we pretty much start off with our lightest lights. Oh, I've got some nice rubbish there in my palette. That's pretty good, isn't it? I'll get some of this. And I'll just wet my paper a little bit. All the way across. I'm using a slightly larger mop than what I'd normally use. If you've got good brushes, you'd usually find you can get one brush and you can do the whole painting. As they get older, they start to wear, and you can't do that. Better. I always stand to paint. And the reason for that is it allows me the freedom to move my arms. And if I was sitting down, I wouldn't be able to do that. Sitting down is pretty much for illustrators, where they work on a smaller scale. We'll wet the paper. Oh, geez, I feel good now. Okay. A little bit of yellow, because there's always a little bit of yellow in the morning. And, I often put a lot of yellow in the sky, and people will want to know, why don't you end up with green when you put the blue in? And I think, well, it might be green. There we go. Get rid of all that. Allow that little bit of yellow. Don't want to waste it, you know. Don't want to waste anything. A bit of cobalt blue. That's a nice colour. Nice sky. Oh, look at that. It looks strong, I know. I'm going to grade it. So I'll keep adding water to it as I come down. As you can see, I'm not just adding water from now. I'm not trying to cut around areas. Pretty much anything I paint over the top is going to be a little bit darker anyway. That'll be good. come down here and I'll change the blue where I'm going to put the road, and I'm using French ultramarine. There we go, just like that. So what we've got now is our basic washes. Okay. Now I'll get rid of my mop brush. There it goes. The big mop anyway, and from here on in, I'll be using a smaller brush, a squirrel hair. It's a fairly cheap one, it's not an expensive. I think it's from China, like everything. And I'll keep working in the areas where I can work wet into wet. Whenever we paint, it's important that we're comfortable with everything we've got. You know, you need your paints where you can just get them. You need your board in front of you at a good height that you can work with. Everything needs to be there. Your water needs to be close. A lot of people I see, they'll have their palette on their left-hand side and they're right-handed, and they're forever going over here. I don't see the point in that. Just a lot of work. So I'll start with the background. It's still pretty wet, so we'll see how we go. We warm up a little bit, it'll be good. Things will dry a bit quicker. There we go, I'll mix a greyish colour. I don't use Payne's grey, I don't use neutral tint. If I want a grey, I prefer to mix it using the three primaries, red, yellow, blue. So whichever red, yellow, blue, doesn't really matter, as long as you get somewhere around what you're looking for. See how that goes. That's not bad. Yeah, okay. I won't use it up here just yet. And I can carry it on into the road. We'll see how it goes in there. Now while things are wet, gravity will start pulling colours down. So we'll be a little bit careful. Don't do too much. And I'll keep moving. Little lines that you put in will become big. Clean the mess. There we go. Nice and clean. Get a bit of yellow. The yellow I'm using is Aureolin yellow. And it's a fairly multi-purpose yellow, I think. It's fairly neutral. Now, wax on me where it's going to go. The thing about working wet is that trees on the right hand side here, just near the cars, I want them to be greener. And I know that if I wax some yellow in there, it's going to push away most of that grey that I put in earlier. That'd be good. Same as I don't carry green in my palette because I prefer to mix it. It means that I can travel with this. I can use it in the studio, I can use it when I'm teaching, use it anywhere. Right. Okay, now have a little look. Have a little look. I'll notice it's drying a little bit when the shine comes off, and that's when it's safe for me to go into certain areas. The good thing about watercolour is it's very spontaneous, but it can be very tricky. Your timing is everything with watercolour, and I guess the secret to watercolour, really, and don't tell anyone I told you this, but the secret to watercolour is it has a secret ingredient. It's called water. And it's beautiful. The elixir of life. I'm going to make some of this in here. I'll keep working around the painting. That way we can sort of concentrate a bit more. It's burnt sienna. It's Winsor & Newton burnt sienna, and it's the colour out of all the burnt siennas is the one I like. Oh, look at that. Paper's a little bit wet. We won't go too far with this. Be a little bit careful. And I'll be coming back over that later. Hopefully things will dry a bit more. There we go. Put that in there. Change the colour a bit. Colour's very important. Okay. Keep moving around. Brown matter, another one of my favourite colours. There we go. Whack one of that. Cars. Where can I use it? Again, whack some of that. There we go. You'll notice how it's wet, it starts spreading, so it's important that I don't paint too far. All these little dots and dashes, well, they'll become fairly obvious later, with a bit of luck. Good. You notice that I'm sometimes wiping my brush on the pans. It's all about water control. And we have to control the water. A bit like life, isn't it? There's certain things that happen in watercolours that won't happen in a controlled medium like oils and, gouache and acrylics and things like that, where you can control what it does. With watercolour, there's certain things you can't control. And we often end up with things that we call cauliflowers. You sort of get a back run, and sometimes it can look ugly and sometimes it can actually help what you're doing. a lot of people don't like them, but I just look at them as being part of watercolour. And that's what watercolour is. Okay. So, feel it. Get my trusty little mirror. And I can check it from behind. That was a trick that was taught to me by David Taylor, and I really only done it today to show off because I never use it. Just want this to dry a little bit. Okay. So while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm actually going to work on these trees, and then I'll come back to certain areas. So I'll mix up a greenish colour using raw umber and ultramarine blue. Then I can whack in here. Right, now how far it goes, because while that's drying then I can come back here. Important to be able to keep working around. There's some areas you need to be able to work on dry. Put a bit of burnt sienna, maybe. Get some nice browns in there. That's it. So, you'll notice that you can get pretty much all the shapes you want using one brush. You don't need a handful of them. And we don't need to continually keep cleaning them. Bit of blue, ultramarine blue, it's a pretty special colour. Right. If I want it darker, I need to make the paint thicker. Be nice to have that little bit of blue in there. Good. Good. Get rid of that. I have a towel under my paper here. I find it holds it. And then I don't have to tape it down and do everything else. Good. As we go. Let's see how dry that is. That's pretty dry up there. That's good. Okay, so nice bluey colour from the spire. The church itself it's in silhouette because of the way it's sitting on the road. The road comes up and curves. That's why they're catching the light there, but the church itself is actually sitting in another direction. And I think it works better anyway. So even if it wasn't, that's what I'd be doing. Right, a bit greyer perhaps. There we go. That might be better. Okay. Yeah, close enough. Close enough. Yeah. Those red bricks. Put bit of birdseed, you know. Bit of French ultramarine. There we go. Make sure we've got plenty. And a bit of brown madder, which is just a lovely red, I guess. And I'll pick up the bottom here because I don't want to get a hard line. That's better. There we go. Squint. You always tell painters they've got crow's feet because they squint a lot. There we go. Good. There we go. Still a bit damp down there, probably a little bit too damp. But we'll just go with it. We'll make some adjustments here. If I get something like this, I'll look at either lifting it later or adjusting. But that's only because it's wet. Right. Change my colour, change my tone, and use plenty of water. The secret elixir. Too dark, put in more water. Be mindful that things always dry, they don't dry the same. I'm going to concentrate a little bit here, so I'm shutting up, which is probably a godsend for you all. picket fences. There we go. I think I'm quite happy with the way it's coming along at the moment. A little bit cooler, I suppose. When you're painting, irrespective of whether you're painting in watercolour, oils, anything, you always have to ask yourself certain questions when you go to do something. Things like, is it warm enough or is it cool enough? Have you made it too hot? Made it too cool? Everything has to marry in and become a single image. It's very important. We'll just watch our angles there. Keep an eye on our perspective at all times. And perhaps if I do a little bit more to the road, and just sometimes you have to work in certain areas just so that it helps you out with, what it is you're trying to do. Never lock yourself into it becoming a method painter. Whereby you attack every painting the same way. You've got to allow the subject to dictate how you're going to paint it. Top of my little car there. Change things. That's blue, isn't it? It's okay. Yeah. And I'll mix up a bit of a grey. A little bit cooler perhaps. go. This little building over here. Go over that. Back to it. Very important for us to allow colours to mix on the paper. Down. Okay. Get a bit of raw umber. Oh, lovely colour. Looks dreadful in the palette, but it's a really nice colour to paint with. Up. And actually going to bring some in here, and if it runs into the road, I'll be pretty happy with that, I think, because somewhere I've got to get the footpath back in there. I think that's actually better. That's a better idea. Get a little bit of a lost edge in there. There you go. That's another thing. Are your edges lost or are they found? You know, we've got nice found edges up here, but we might get a few lost ones around here. We need to get a good balance. Study it. Where am I going? I'm actually used to demonstrating in front of people who want to ask questions. Shapes. They're all shapes. Deepen that up a bit. A bit cooler. So that it recedes a bit more. Something there. Don't know what it is, but we're just outside the Bowls Club in Fitzroy, so that's probably what I'm looking at. There, put a bit of a shadow in there. Good. I'm going to have to do something with that. Don't know yet. When you get areas like that, you're better off not stressing. Just keep working and then come back to it when you decide what you're going to do. Now as I get darker, I can move in. Each time I start off with my really light washes, which is just natural. Get in the light colours early, because you can't go back and put them in later. You get them in early, move to your mid-tones, and then you move to your darks. So if you knock down the process, it becomes a little bit easier. Okay, put something in there. We'll get a couple of windows in this guy and see if we can't make it work. Maybe it needs 3. 3 is always a good number, isn't it? No one will ever come back and say it's wrong because they're not there. Shadow. A little bit of graffiti. There's a cottage in here. Single story. It's a little shop front, I think. Okay. It's like that. Okay. Okay. Stop. Might find a little pod. Put it up somewhere. Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. Now this needs a little bit of drying just for a few minutes. Hurry over. Now, if we keep these edges fairly soft, it's because they're out of your peripheral vision and our focus is more back here. So we don't just, do things without thinking. I mean, every brush stroke has a purpose. a bit of a different tone in there. Mix up our tones. Got some windows, and we put in what we call shadow shapes. Dormer windows. A bit more there. Good. Clean this up. Okay. Colour. There we go. Get a bit more strength in there. Kind of tell us what time of the year it is. A slightly thicker paint because I don't want it to bleed too much. Get in here, it'll become a little bit softer up against the wet and a hard edge away from it. Another one in there later. So timing's got a lot to do with it. I need to wait for certain areas to dry so that I can come back to it. Yeah. Got a bit of an overhang from a tree coming in here, and I find that that's always good for balance. So sort of get at greener. If you find that you put a colour down and you're not happy with it, you want to make an adjustment. Don't try and rub it out. Right? Just mix the colour you want and go over the top. The colour that you had might be just what you're looking for later. And when it dries, it looks different. And if it doesn't work out, well, it's just a bit of paper. Put that in there. Now I'm going a little bit bigger, so I need to sometimes add a few things. some overhang branches using the tip of the brush. And holding it loosely at the end of the vary the colour. Don't overdo it. If you can overdo it, you'll find you'll go back to your painting at a later date and think, God, what have I got all those lines in there for? Just make sure, coming in off the edge. I think that'll do. It's not quite dry enough yet. Before I finish off the road, put in the shadows, I need to make sure that it is properly dry. Otherwise it'll just bleed, go everywhere. We'll see how that's going. Little bits of calligraphy that we use to finish it off. Okay. Down a bit. If it doesn't work, I'm going to put an extension on the church, which they've been trying to get done for some time, so it'll be good. Oops, excuse me. Now, I've got another trusty brush that I like. It's a Rigger number 8. Cheapest chips. It's just a tack line, and it's really good for doing things like lampposts. We'll mix a dark. My favourite dark is always mixed with French ultramarine and burnt sienna. And if I want it to be a little bit cooler, I have more blue. If I want it warmer, I have more of the burnt sienna. One in here. Well, put one in here. I might make it a little bit taller. There we go. And the best way to do it is to just go straight down. Right. And when you get little breaks, which you probably see in here, where the paint doesn't necessarily give you a really solid line, it's probably better because it looks like it's actually picking up a bit of light. Put it across there. Street light. That's okay. Yes. A few birds sitting up there. I'm going to say it's quite exciting getting yourself videoed. Bend in it, doesn't matter. Didn't come from a very good tree. Get your finger, rub it off. That's better. Get it hidden in there, I hope. Okay. Probably put a couple more in. Probably come back to some of these. Actually, I use a little bit of gouache occasionally. This is, to me it's just watercolour anyway, opaque. There we go. One of those concrete ones, so it has a different thickness in it. There. Okay, we've got a light that's coming in from the side of it here. There, that's okay. Good hard look. I need to finish the cars off. Perhaps a little bit here. This needs to be more shadow. Get the lines in the shadows and we'll be right. Oh gosh. It's exciting. I'll do a little jump, but that belongs to David Taylor. Can't do that. Put a door in there. Door in the shadows. Okay. You see, as it dries, it just doesn't spread as much. And that's probably what we're looking for. There. There. Wouldn't mind to have a little bit of shrubbery in the garden. That'd be nice. Just might. There. Slightly. Growing over the fence. Doesn't really matter what it is. No one needs to know. Okay. Okay. Now that it's drying to the extent that I want it to dry, I can start doing things like putting in these little tree trunks and things like that. It's a bit different when you're outdoor painting, it'll dry differently. I suppose plein air painting for me is the greatest teacher. And if I don't do that, I can't come back and do this. And I'm never really as satisfied with what I'm doing in the studio as I am looking at something that I do outdoors. You know, for all its mistakes, there's always something about plein air painting that, it just knocks the socks off being stuck indoors. But we don't always have that choice, and much. Okay. Still too wet. Let's have a look at our car. It might be okay now. a little bit careful. If I'm painting a car, I just have to try and convince people that it is a car. We don't need to know what make and model it is. If it's too obvious, someone might turn around and say, hey, that's my car you painted. I didn't give you permission. You know, like that. Okay. Quite wet there. We can test it out. Oh, that's okay. Well, I can get some figures into this. Right, I'm going to make a nice light wash. Going to allow me to put some stripes in the road. Okay. There are tram tracks down here. Not sure that we want to put them in. Dark stuff in here. Good. Just put a couple little figures perhaps walking along here, which they're allowed to do. And we'll come back and put the shadows in. A few tram lines, overhead wires. And with a bit of luck we might have a painting. That's little head. Yeah, they're just shapes. Change the colours. Overhead wires. Tracks down here. Always a bit scary, this bit. Yeah, don't want them to stand out too much. Let's get those broken lines here. Not to make them too obvious. Put a little dark into that. Places. Get some of those shadows. Okay, I've been thinking about this, believe it or not, and I think I'm just going to I'm not happy with what's happened here with this little. I'm okay with the bleeding out here because I think you can overlook that, but I'm not happy with the bleeding in here. So I've got to put something there to help take your attention away from it. It's a bit hard to lift it off. Yeah, okay. We'll have another little go trying to lift it. Okay, so I have this special brush. It's called a scrubber. Get some water in it. And we'll have a go at trying to just soften that off a bit. It's coming out. Okay. Make sure those edges stay a bit softer. Okay. And we'll just try and fix up the window here. Right, lost my line. Do. Go. That. Now we can still see that there's quite a bit of sheen on here. It's too wet and it just needs to be dry. What can I do in the meantime? Look at some of these areas. Right. I need to keep squinting. Just going to close this off a little bit. Window in there. Don't want to do too much of that. Nothing in there. Don't know why. Whatever. Window on the side of the building there. Certainly won't have a window in here. Although there are a couple of chimneys that we didn't put in. And what I'm looking for, some titanium white that I often have on the lid of my palette. There we go. I'll use a small brush. Pick it up from here. Put a bit of raw umber with it. The important thing to remember when you're using stuff like gouache is that where watercolour tends to fade off as it dries, gouache will actually dry a little bit darker than what you put it on. I don't know what the scientific reason for that is. I'm sure there's one. Yeah, a couple of those. They look like holy crosses, don't they? Yeah. Which is okay. Get that in. We're picking up a bit of light. Reflected light sometimes helps. You never have to explain. That's the main thing. Some bits where I would have liked to have kept a bit of highlight and didn't. It's okay to do this. At the end of the day, it's no right or wrong, it's what works. Make sure our folks are good. Put up that one. There. Yeah, so now I need it to dry. So I'll put my shadows in and hopefully it'll be all done. Now, I could use a hairdryer, but I wouldn't be using a hairdryer outdoors, so why would I use one indoors? Good. Okay. I might just stop it there for a few minutes and we'll come back when it's fully dry. Okay, now we've had our little break, we can start. We're nice and dry, beautiful. And I'm going to start by putting these shadows in. I'm going to still work on this a little bit because I'm not happy, it's got a bit smudgy. So I've got a plan for that and it'll excite you no end. I've just changed my brush over to this is a sable mop and I love it, and I really loved it when it was brand new, but now it's a little bit older and it's a bit worn and they do lose their point. So you know, you go out and spend a lot of money on a brush, but just be aware they do wear out. So if you spend your $300 on a brush, you want to hold on to it for as long as you can. Especially if you're painting, you'll find that I'll bring these in here, come up there we go. You'll find the rough paper tends to wear your brushes out a little bit more. A bit like sandpaper. Here we go. And these shadows are cast from overhead trees. Just join that up there. Always mix more than you need, otherwise you find you run out, like I am now. Right. Always think. I've always got to think of composition. Composition is all about balance. And that's balance where we put our elements. Balance our colour. Right. I'm going to come back to the building here at the end. Okay. And because I know this building, I know there are two sections between the tower. Just need to get a little bit closer because of the glare. Right. That off. Soften that edge off. Then I'll think about I'm going to bring some more of this foliage through, just around here. Okay, so I'll get a smaller brush. And what it'll do is bring this foliage a bit closer to us, but it'll just sort of fix up that little area, I hope. It's never a given. Okay, there we go. There might even be two. There might even be another one here. That's good thing about leaves and foliage in these trees, you'll always get a little leaf that's just sitting there and it's not attached to anything. And it kind of, there we go. And I guess the reason for that is that there's a fair bit of light comes in. Light reflections. So these things, I don't really consider them mistakes. It's just watercolour. And we might put a little bit of a tree in there. Okay. Something in here. For some reason. So the car get a little bit lost. Lost edges and found edges. Bit of squinting. We squint, it kind of helps us to determine what needs to be done. Put a little bit of gouache on here. Let's move over there. Pick up that colour I had before. There we go. Don't make it too wet. A bit dry. There. A bit of light on there. Okay. Don't need to do too much. There's a fine line between knowing when to stop and when to go. And I think we're about ready to stop because the painting is always finished on the last brush stroke and then it's ruined on the next one. So, yeah. And if I'm not careful, it'll be the next one that I put in. There we go. So, we'll peel the paper back, the tape. We only do this so that you get nice clean edges and it looks good for you. Otherwise, we would worry about it. Here we go. There we have St George's Road in Fitzroy, looking at the Coptic church in the background and a bit of overhang, a couple of cars which could be better but they'll do. You know, a couple of little figures that we've put in. That's it. Okay, thank you.